In 300 yards, keep left to continue on Fags Road. Keep left to continue on Fags Road. In a quarter of a mile, turn left onto Great Southwest Road, A30. Take the second left onto Great Southwest Road, A30. Continue on Great Southwest Road for 3/4 of a mile.
Including from the UK Health Security Agency and England's Chief Medical Officer. In weighing up the risks and opportunities of this policy once again, there are two new factors. The first is that our population as a whole is now better protected against hospitalization from COVID-19. Omicron's increased infectiousness means that at the peak of the recent winter spike,
in a quarter of a mile, take the exit towards Heathrow Airport.
According to the ONS, around 24% of England's population has had at least one positive COVID-19 test. And as of today in England, 84% of people over 12 have had a primary course.
Take the exit towards Heathrow Airport.
64% have been boosted, including over 90% of over 50s. The second factor,
in a quarter of a mile, keep left at the fork to continue towards Southern Perimeter Road.
Less severe. When taken together with the first factor, that we now have greater population protection, the evidence shows that the risk of presentation to emergency care or hospital admission with Omicron is approximately half of that for Delta. Given these dramatic changes, it is not only right, but responsible to revisit the balance of risks and opportunities that guided our...
Keep left at the fork.
While vaccination remains our very best line of defense against COVID-19, I believe that it is no longer proportionate to require vaccination as a condition of deployment through statute. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, today I'm announcing that we will launch a consultation on ending vaccination as a condition of deployment in health and all social care settings.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the second exit and stay on Southern Perimeter Road.
I have always been clear that our rules must remain proportionate and balanced. And of course, should we see another dramatic change in the virus, it would be only responsible to review this policy again. Madam Deputy Speaker, some basic facts remain, of course. Vaccines save lives, and everyone working in health and social care has a professional duty to be vaccinated against COVID-19. So while we will seek to end vaccination as a condition of deployment in health and social care settings using statute, I am taking the following steps. First, I have written to professional regulators operating across health to ask them to urgently review current guidance to registrants on vaccinations, including COVID-19.
Exit the roundabout onto Southern Perimeter Road. Continue on Southern Perimeter Road for 1.5 miles.
NHS to review its policies on the hiring of new staff and the deployment of existing staff, taking into account their vaccination status.
England's Health Secretary Sajid Javid live in the Commons. You heard it live here on LBC. He's changed his mind, and he says, because the evidence has changed when it comes to mandatory vaccinations for people working in health and social care. Officially, he's launching a consultation, but he very much wants to end the policy. Charlotte Lynch has more on this in a moment. Our main news tonight is Sue Gray's report. Lisa, listening to today's developments. Lisa, you've heard Sue Gray, you've heard Boris Johnson's response. What's your response?
Oh, fuming. I'm absolutely fuming. He's just got to go. He clearly didn't believe that there was a huge risk to health, or why would he have risked his family, friends, colleagues in parties? But he locked us down. The damage he's caused to our children, our community, there's a divide of people everywhere. People are angry with each other, the vaccine versus not vaccine, all of that. And it just makes you doubt everything. And at the moment as well, I'm fuming that we're wasting so much money. So much of our taxpayers' money on these reports. The people involved, they're not cheap labour. They're spending their time putting these reports together, the police time. They've got better things to do. It's just making me absolutely mad. He either had passes or he didn't. It's clear he did. Just admit it and go. Stop wasting more of our money. You know, we've got enough going on with things like Russia and that, you know, the borders, the electricity bills, my bills are doubled. He can't be trusted. And as a leader, how can you have a leader that can't be trusted?
Lisa, thank you. What do you say? 0345 6060 973 at 6:30, the LBC News. Here's Amelia Cox.
Downing Street says an updated version of Sue Gray's report into lockdown parties will be published once Scotland Yard has finished its investigation. Boris Johnson has told MPs changes will be made in Downing Street after the senior civil servant criticised a failure of leadership. The Health Secretary has announced a consultation into whether to scrap plans to make the COVID vaccine mandatory for NHS staff in England. Frontline health workers had been given until April to get both jabs. There are concerns it would cause serious staffing shortages. And the Foreign Secretary has announced new legislation to expand the UK sanctions in the event Russia invades Ukraine. Liz Truss has told MPs new powers would allow the government to target a much broader range of individuals and businesses in Moscow.
LBC Business Update.
With Direct Line Landlord Insurance. Come direct for landlord insurance.
Hundreds of jobs are likely to go at Tesco as it closes its meat, fish and deli counters in more than 300 stores. The supermarket is also closing 7 of its 13 Jack's discount stores, while the remaining 6 will become Tesco's. LBC weather, rain continuing in northwestern areas tonight, lows of 4 degrees.
This is LBC.
With Tesco's Aldi Price Match, you can save yourself a trip. So why not enjoy the time saved with some breathing exercises? Breathe in and out. In and out. Or you could just have a lovely cuppa. Tesco has price matched hundreds of products you love. Tesco. Every little helps. Comparable products shopped in GBLD stores and or online twice.
In a quarter of a mile at Western Perimeter Road roundabout, take the first exit and stay on Southern Perimeter Road.
Price match.
If someone has COVID-19, they breathe it out in particles. Particles that hang in the air like smoke. In airless rooms, COVID-19 can build up over time, so it's harder to avoid breathing it in. So when you're with others, open windows to disperse these particles.
Exit the roundabout onto Southern Perimeter Road.
Stop COVID-19 hanging around.
It's the talk.
In 200 yards, at the roundabout, take the second exit onto Airport Way, A3113.
Now from just £22 a month for 24 months. With average speeds from 38 to 145 megabits per second. And award-winning customer experience. Brilliant. Deals that make sense. So
Exit the roundabout onto Airport Way. Continue on Airport Way for half a mile. In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the fourth exit onto the M25 slip road to M4, M40. Exit the roundabout onto the slip road.
Their first jab, although some reports were that could be as many as well.
Continue for half a mile.
The deadline for them to get their first dose to meet the cutoff was this Thursday, but because of warnings about staffing pressures, the Health Secretary has just announced they could get to keep their jobs, subject to a consultation.
Given these dramatic changes, it is not only right, but responsible to revisit the balance of risks and opportunities that government...
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M25.
Vaccination remains our very best line of defense against COVID-19. I believe that it is no longer proportionate to require vaccination as a condition of deployment through statute. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, today I'm announcing that we will launch a consultation on ending vaccination as a condition of deployment in health and all social...
Continue on M25 for 1 mile.
And the will of this House, the government will revoke the regulations.
Now, it's not the full U-turn that some were expecting, but ministers had been facing calls to at least delay the requirement due to concerns about major staff shortages in order to provide enough time to persuade more NHS staff to get the jab. The chief executive of King's College Hospital Trust in London, just one trust, has warned it's set to lose as many as 1,000 staff. The London Mayor Sadiq Khan also told LBC...
In half a mile, at junction 15, use the left lane to take the M4 exit to Reading, Slough.
When I speak to colleagues in the NHS, is if the NHS is going to sack staff because they've not had the vaccine at a time we've got record vacancies in the NHS, we're in danger of the NHS being unable to meet the needs of...
Use the left lane to exit at junction 15, then keep left at the fork.
Some managers had already started conversations with their staff, the process of laying them off to meet this week.
Keep left at the fork.
Tom Shaw is an unvaccinated dental student at Newcastle University who is facing being unable to work in the NHS.
I don't think it can be forgotten that the past few months have been incredibly challenging on affected workers' mental health, which has certainly led some to go on sick leave because of all the stress that they felt around this. A U-turn doesn't change that experience that they've had. It certainly doesn't sit right with me, but I'm sure others would say the same thing, that we can even find ourselves in a situation where workers can go from being clapped 1 year to being on the brink of being sacked the next year.
Well, the social care sector have called this unfair. Around 40,000 people working in care homes lost their jobs back in November for this exact reason, because they weren't jabbed. So they're angry that the damage has already been done there, and this is at least being considered for NHS staff. It was not considered for them.
Charlotte, thank you. More now on Sue Gray's report. We were told by Boris Johnson for the longest time to wait for Sue Gray. Well, because the police are investigating, her findings were somewhat limited. We've reported them this afternoon, and now he's asking us to wait for the police work. The police said today that they are looking at about 500 documents, 300 photographs. Let's catch up with Danny Shaw, policing and justice commentator. Danny, what do you think of what the police are saying?
Well, Eddie, I think this is an investigation that could be wrapped up in a few weeks. I don't think it should take an inordinate length of time. The number of documents and photographs, images they've got, 300 images, 500 pages of information, that is not a huge amount. The police are used to dealing with thousands of files and images and so on.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
Specific dates that they're looking at on which gatherings are alleged to have taken place. That's about 12 alleged gatherings in all. If they have 1 or 2 detectives assigned to each date, that's a team of around 20-25 detectives. This is something that they should be able to get done in a few weeks, I would have think.
Keep right to stay on M4.
By Sue Gray, they should be able to quickly identify the individuals, write to them, asking whether or not...
Continue on M4 for 4 miles.
...that gathering, and if they say they don't, then presumably they'll be sued with a fixed penalty fine.
I wonder whether the guilty, if any of them are guilty, whether there'll be names.
That's an interesting question. I mean, normally, if a high-profile investigation, someone, let's say, is given a caution or goes to court and they're found guilty, or they're charged with an offence, then the Metropolitan Police will name the individual. This is slightly different because you're dealing with very low-level, potentially fixed penalty notices. Could be £60, £100, something of that order. My guess is that because it's very high profile, and because if they are given a fixed penalty fine and accept it, I think the police probably will name the individuals concerned. I think it'd be very difficult not to do so. But that is still a question about how it's going to be handled, whether or not the police would have released the details as they finalise each particular event. Will they, have dealt with the first gathering on the 20th of May and release the details of that and how it's been resolved, or will they wait and do the whole lot as one bundle at the end of their investigation? I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but I would have thought that they would want to provide regular updates because it's so high profile and there's so much interest in it.
Danny, thank you. That's Danny Shaw. We've reported throughout the afternoon the goings-on in the Westminster Parliament, in the Commons, Boris Johnson speaking in his defence. We heard too a very pointed question from Theresa May and other Conservative MPs tepid or limited in their support for Boris Johnson after his statement. We're just hearing, and by the way, Boris Johnson should be meeting his fellow Conservative MPs about now. We'll report back as soon as we hear anything. Just hearing that the Conservative MP Angela Richardson has resigned as a ministerial aide. She is, I believe, an aide to Michael Gove. She cited deep disappointment over Boris Johnson's handling of all of this. And that's a theme that's come up more than once. Theo and Ben both reporting on Westminster, telling us that there are MPs who were not too alarmed by Sue Gray's report. What's alarmed them is Boris Johnson's response in the Commons this afternoon to Sue Gray's report. Let me know what your response is. We'll catch up with Anita in just a moment. Our phone number 0345 6060 973. I promised you Sam Nadine Dorries, who has been speaking about the reaction to Sue Gray's report.
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Was it culture?
Secretary of State, does the Prime Minister think he's done anything wrong in relation to alleged gatherings in Downing Street?
Well, look, he came to the dispatch box and he apologised.
What did he apologise for?
I think he apologised for the hurt and upset that people in the country have felt at what they perceive to have been the culture in Number 10. But I would just say that, you know, Number 10, people think it's the Prime Minister's home. It's actually an office block. As Sue Gray says in her report, it's an office with 400 people inside with an iconic front door. And I think that, you know, the context within which we view what happens has to be viewed, I think, through the filter of the fact that this is a department, not the Prime Minister's home.
But he should have been aware of what was going on
so look,
in his department. There's another point.
The Prime Minister works 16 hours a day, and he's literally moved physically from one appointment to the next by an individual. I think the most important thing in this report is the fact that Sue Gray has made some really important recommendations. A permanent secretary, establishing a command structure within Number 10, so that these 400 civil servants have, you know, a permanent secretary, someone at the top. The recommendation to rewrite the code for SPADs and for civil servants is important, but also the establishment of an office of the Prime Minister, because I think he needs that support. So they were really important. I mean, people have been calling for weeks. Number 10's got to change. No one's actually said how it needs to change or what needs to be done.
What you say to your colleagues who say what needs to change is the person at the top, because he is ultimately responsible?
Look, those people who are saying that are the same people who were saying it before he was elected as leader.
But you don't agree that he's responsible?
They're the same people. If you're talking about, you know, the voices off of the Andrew Bridgens and co, they've been it's just another bandwagon.
But you're responsible, Secretary of State, what happens in your department.
I am.
Do you not think the same applies to the Prime Minister?
I literally do not know what 400,000 of my civil servants are doing on the floors in my department.
But if you knew that they had done something wrong,
we do have
would you take responsibility?
We do have a permanent secretary who is responsible for those civil servants. That's what they need. And that's a very good way of comparing, of analogy actually. We need the same structure in Number 10 as I have in my department. I have a permanent secretary who looks after the civil servants. It's not my role, and we need the same in Number 10, which is what Sue Gray has recommended.
Do you know if the Prime Minister attended a party in his flat on the 13th of November?
In a quarter of a mile, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
That the conclusion, the report said, no, nothing should be concluded from the fact that, I mean, it's reached the bar for investigation. It doesn't mean that anything untoward did happen. So, you know, let's just see what happens.
Just finally,
exit at junction 6.
Just finally, you mentioned some of the things Sue Gray said. She also said that people at the heart of government had failed to meet the high standards that they...
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the 3rd exit onto Tons Lane, A355.
You know, we only have a sketchy kind of interim report. It's all Sue Gray is allowed to provide the Prime Minister with at the moment. I want to wait until I've got the full details. And again, we don't know who she's referring to.
That's our Westminster correspondent Ben Kentish talking there to Nadine Dorries, who is the Secretary of State for Media, Sport, Culture and Digital. Anita is listening to all of this. Anita, what do you think? Hi.
Oh, Eddie, where do I start? Honestly, to be honest, I'm just fuming over it. I've watched it all this afternoon, and Nadine Dorries, forget the politics, stick to writing your books. And I've bought some of them. But Eddie, it's just disgrace. I mean, I was brought up from Macmillan, and from Macmillan to now, I cannot recognise him as my Prime Minister anymore. I can't. I'm ashamed to have him as my Prime Minister of this country.
But you heard Nadine Dorries' explanation. Does none of that stack up for you?
Certainly not. I'm thinking of all the decent ones, the one that you said reported had resigned. That's one with integrity. There's
Andrew Mitchell stood up in the House today and said he was no longer supporting Boris Johnson.
Yes, and Theresa May, and I've got to say, and I've been, until now, all this, a Tory voter, Eddie. A Tory voter. And I've got to say, I thought,
exit the roundabout onto Tons Lane.
Exactly how I'm feeling. to put it bluntly. And how is he when he has these meetings on...
In a quarter of a mile, slight left towards Tippenham Lane.
Eddie, the Queen of England.
Anita, I've got some interesting news. As I say, Boris Johnson right now is meeting Conservative MPs. Jessica Elgert, who's chief political correspondent of The Guardian, she's just tweeted this.